how do you view legacy auto in this entire equation? Like, what's like? Do you think competition, not competition? There's like all these theories about which I'm part of. Like majority of legacy automakers are probably going to go bankrupt by the end of the decade, kind of maybe early next decade, but it's going to be difficult for them to survive because of just the disruption of it. How do you think about the EV landscape in that world?
I would say this. I'm actually rooting for most of them. They definitely have their warts, and there's things they've said about Tesla that I don't like, and things they've done that I don't like or agree with. But my reason for rooting for them is I want more EVs available to people. Like, I want a street full of EVs that aren't spewing nonsense into the air. And again, I just think I would say they're better vehicles, but Legacy has a lot to prove that they can sell these vehicles. And one thing, again, I think people need to be aware of is that they have all these promises and predictions of what they're going to build, but there is a world that exists where these vehicles don't catch on, and I don't know how far Legacy will push it. If there's going to be a challenge that the EV movement has, it will be these legacy auto companies not being able to have a product that hits and sells in volume. I mean, no one has cracked 10,000 a month yet. And that's kind of a basic barrier that needs to be crossed. GM can talk a lot about Ultium, and they have the factories in motion and they're building the cells, and I've said for a long time, this is a huge year for them. But if these cars like the Blazer and the Equinox and the Silverado aren't priced well and people aren't buying them because they're cross shopping with the Model Y, that's a big problem, like a huge problem. I guess I would summarize it as saying I'm rooting for them. I want them to succeed because there's the market is so big. There's room for multiple players. Tesla can't sell all the EVs themselves. They need some help. And let's not forget Tesla's mission, right? I think a lot of people get so sucked into Tesla stock side, they forget about the reason Tesla even exists, and it's to transition the world to sustainable energy. And again, they cannot do it alone. So I'm rooting for them, some more than others. Like, I'm definitely more of a Rivian fan than I am a GM fan. But at the end of the day, like, I would love to have options for people that not everybody wants a Tesla. And part of it, like when there is millions on the road and they're selling, whatever, 5, 10, 20 million, it's like,
Yeah.
it's just going to be so ubiquitous that it's less desirable for certain people. Growing up, I always wanted a car that wasn't seen locally. Like, that's still a desire that I have. It wouldn't draw me away from Tesla, obviously, because I'm such a fan and supporting their mission, but that's a real thing, and I like options for the market. It's good for the consumer because it'll push Tesla to drive prices down and keep innovating and not stagnate. So I just think it's all good things for the consumer in the world to have Legacy figure it out. Like, I don't want to bail them out. I don't want my tax dollars going to more bailouts. And I feel like that's might be where we're headed. So I'm rooting for
Yeah.
them not to struggle too much.
I agree 100% with that. I think the very frustrating part of it is when I look at the chart that I saw over the weekend. So January through June, over 60% of the market share in the US for EVs is still Tesla. And the next bigger player is, was a Ford or GM at 6%. I think it was GM at 6% because they have the Bolt, which is going to be discontinued. And then, or not discontinued, like rebadged,
Just
or
change. Yeah.
who knows. Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
next one's Ford at 5%. So, and then we're 11, 12, 13 years into this whole thing if you go from the original Roadster. And there's still this giant gap. And then when I look at the pricing for the Blazer and I put it side by side to the Model Y, you get less range for $10,000 more. What the hell is that? Like, I don't understand
Right.
that at all.
Yeah.
The Silverado EV, they're only going to go with the work truck. They discontinue the cheap model. Then you got the Lightning, which is it went from being sold out to we're going to drop the price and open reservations for everybody. Like, okay, what's going on there? Then you got the Mach-E sitting on dealer lots for 100 plus days of
Hmm.
inventory in hand after they shut down their freaking factory for 2 months to retool for more Mach-E's that I guess nobody's buying. So I look at that and I'm like, and I'm just like you. I'm like, I want these. I'm rooting for them. I want all of them to survive. I think Jim Farley, out of all the legacy CEOs, he's doing by far the best job of actually
Hmm.
setting a culture to moving forward. But when it comes to execution and actually getting a product out there that people will want, there's obviously a gap. Because if there wasn't a gap, we wouldn't have 100 days on hand supply of Mach-E's, and GM would be selling way more Celestiques or whatever the hell other thing, the whatever else they're building, and they wouldn't be talking about discontinuing the Bolt. And then it's like, oh no, wait, we're probably not going to hit our number, so let's not discontinue it. Let's keep it there so we can hit the numbers, but don't worry about it. It's not profitable, but it's okay. We'll keep selling it. So It's
Hmm.
very frustrating. And I almost feel like, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I almost feel like in this world, especially in the States, it might be global. I think if you're a legacy automaker building an EV, you are dead. I think there is a brand stain when you're buying an EV from, say, yeah, like a legacy. I think people are looking for new brands because it's maybe it's like psychological, or maybe the wise EV buyer might be watching you. It might be watching Rob. They might be watching me. They might be watching Dave, or what other,
Hmm.
whatever other networks that are out there that are maybe helping them understand this landscape a little bit better. And they're bypassing the legacy automaker that's clearly inferior in so many different metrics. And they're going to buy from the new player that actually knows how to make an EV. What do you
Hmm.
think about that?
Yeah, I do think about that a lot actually, and I do think there's some truth there for sure. But I think you could also push back on that in saying, for example, like people might be hesitant to buy a Rivian or a Lucid because they might not be around in 3 years. There's no guarantees
Mm.
that they make it. And again, I'm not predicting they won't. I think Rivian will, and Lucid's TBD in my book. But I think that would cause me some skepticism, like how well will they be able to service, what will the used market be like, what they just, there's not enough data. So I think certain consumers, that may push them away from that. But I absolutely agree that I think the informed consumer will understand maybe the difference that building an EV is, but I still think most people don't have any idea. Like if I were to walk at the mall or on the beach and ask 100 people, like, what they think about ICE vehicles versus EVs and how easy it is for legacy to make it an EV, I don't think their takes would be very informed. So I
Right.
think they might think it's just, oh yeah, you just slap a battery on it and everything else is the same type of deal. When you kind of have to be in the weeds to know that that's not necessarily the case. So I just think we're at that point now. I do think we're past the early adopters. I do feel like we're in that chasm before the early majority, and it's going to be could be a tough year given where interest rates are at, given that there's not that many options available, given the dealers aren't really on board selling EVs, given the manufacturers are not really knowing what the demand's going to look like, given all of those factors. So I do want to see 6 months into the future what the inventory numbers look like at legacy auto dealers, because I think it's a little too early to draw too many conclusions. Because again, some of those dealer inventory numbers include vehicles in transit. So that could be a portion of Ford F-150 Lightnings that they just built now because production's up and running that aren't even to the dealers yet. But again, if we're still going to have dealer markups and the dealers aren't incentivized to sell them because they're dragging their feet or they're discontent with how Ford's been treating them, like there's just so many factors at play. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch for sure.
Have you been tracking this UAW thing with the big three?
Yes.
Yeah. What's your gut
Yeah.
telling you there? Because my gut's telling me strike.
Yeah. Man, if I were to bet on it, it feels that way from what we're consuming, what the narrative out there is. And it's such a big one right now. Like this is a monumental season for both parties, given the EV transition. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. But at the same time, given how much that's going to impact legacy when they're already struggling, like part of me feels like they're going to go down to the wire and do a last minute type of thing, kind of like we saw with the debt ceiling situation.
Mm.
It gets played up in the media and people get clicks and they make it as, sensational as you can, but then the actual negotiations realize they have another month to get closer and figure it out. So it really wouldn't surprise me either way. And again, part of me thinks Legacy Auto just wants to get a deal done. Maybe they'll pay a little bit more, but they know they need to keep these people happy. But if the UAW is really going to stay like super hardline and get crazy, then they could absolutely strike. So yeah, we'll see.